Amazon's Jeff Bezos coming out swinging at the progressive left, coming after his wealth. President Trump says he's on a seek and destroy mission against the goons inside the FBI. And the anti-weaponization fund created by DOJ for victims of a weaponized government, well, it has the media in a tailspin. It's Friday, May 22nd, and this is news and commentary from America's Heartland. You're watching Heartlander News. Hello and welcome in to this edition of Heartlander News. My name is Chris Stigall. You know, I can't help but notice as we're celebrating the 250th anniversary of the country, just last week we celebrated prayer, a national day of prayer. We celebrated our founders' inclusion of, yes, God and a creator in this country, and just a natural restoration of all things good and wholesome in our founding 250 years ago. It comes as no surprise that the American left, like Katie Tur over there at MSNBC, they just really hate everything about it.
What about this passage from Mike Johnson declaring that our rights do not derive from government? They come from you, our creator and heavenly father. Is this him putting God over the Declaration of Independence? McKay?
Well, you know, I actually think that idea is not wholly uncommon. I mean, the idea that we have certain inalienable rights that come from God can be read in a fairly benign way, which is basically that we have innate human rights that our Constitution and our government, our democratic government, are meant to codify, right? That idea is not totally abnormal. I think that the thing that might alarm some people is some of the rhetoric that we heard at this rally that we are in a spiritual battle, right? That the forces of good and evil are at work here, and that partisan politics is injected directly into the spiritual biblical rhetoric. We have heard that for the last couple of years. It's been ratcheted up more and more, especially since Donald Trump lost in 2020. And it can lead to some pretty dangerous places if it's not kept in check.
Yeah, it can lead to some very dangerous places if discussions of spiritual battle aren't kept in check. Yes, heaven forbid that we look through, scripture as evidence. No, in fact, I would say to Mr. Coppins and to Miss Tur, it's when you turn from a creator, it's when you stop understanding that the creator is the undergirding and the underpinning of all natural rights, and they're worth defending, and there are dark forces that wish to undermine and destroy it. If you stop understanding that fundamentally, that's when this country is in real danger. The national moment of prayer and the weekend's events of last are not what threatened this country. I've got a stack of stories, in fact, that really threaten this country, and I'll get into it in a minute. But even just the basic restoration of some of our beautiful monuments and other things, like the reflecting pool in Washington, D.C., between the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument, or maybe the new ballroom at the White House. You know, I see today from Axios that Democrats are moving to get this security measure that they're trying to pass through the Senate right now. They're trying to get that stripped from the Senate bill, and Republicans may well do it to fund security, new security for the new White House ballroom. Now, what exactly could you possibly object to about that? Democrats just object to anything instinctively, even though they've wanted this ballroom as much as President Trump and other Republicans have too. It's a need. And in 2026, after we saw what happened at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, isn't it obvious security is paramount these days and maybe a little too lax? But while the media is busy complaining about President Trump's new White House ballroom, they're missing a truly fascinating story, actually, that's happening underneath it. So over there on the side of the old East Wing, if you've ever been or seen it, you see this massive underground military complex President Trump has announced is also being replaced. It's the aging Presidential Emergency Operations Center, something a lot of people have never heard of before. I certainly really hadn't known much of it, PEOC for short. And it was constructed back in 1942 during World War II. That old bunker, it served its purpose for decades, but that was built for an entirely different era. And that's the point. Today's threats are drones, hypersonic missiles, EMP attacks, biological weapons. and the possibility of long, drawn-out national emergencies. So an old facility, like what was under the East Wing, simply wasn't designed for all of that. And what I really admire, as is always the case, President Trump was totally transparent. He's not trying to hide what's going on. He said it plainly this week on Air Force One. He said, quote, "The military is building a massive complex under the ballroom. The ballroom essentially becomes a shed for what's being built under it." Did anybody catch that? You should have. Media should have. He described it as a shed, the ballroom. The ballroom's not the point. The ballroom's not the thing. So when you hear all these hysterics about the $1 billion in security funds coming from taxpayers being passed through the Senate, and now Republicans are thinking about ditching it, what are we talking about here? We're talking about the above-ground ballroom that's gotten all the attention is really just a protective shield, a cover, a lid for the serious work that's intended below. What's below is exactly what you'd want protecting the president, I'd think, and the continuity of our government at large. Of course, there's something deeper going on in Washington right now than just the ballroom or even the reflecting pool and the nice photos of cleaned up landmarks. You see, when you see things like a ballroom being rebuilt or the reflecting pond cleaned up, when you see all those old fountains running again, and the monuments are being properly cared for, and work being done at the White House, it's more than just maintenance. And it's really important to understand that. This is about an attitude. President Trump is reflecting an attitude in this country, cleaning up and restoring things like the reflecting pool. It's not just about sparkling water. It's a metaphor for something much bigger. It's the simple duty to take care of what we've been given, whether it's our Constitution, our traditions, the elderly, the unborn, or anything else worth preserving. Civilizations don't usually crumble overnight. They slowly decay. And they decay when people stop maintaining what they were given. When gratitude, say to an almighty, fades, and people start treating beautiful buildings, traditions, laws, institutions, God, when they start treating that like it's disposable, unnecessary, antiquated, of a bygone era, well, that's when cities, families, whole countries begin to crumble. Listen, the men who built Washington weren't just thinking about their own time, and I don't think Donald Trump is thinking of his own time now either. Maybe his legacy, but he's thinking well into the future. Our founders created symbols meant to last. The founders gave us the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and they expected us to guard them and pass them on intact, not bend or rewrite them whenever those inconvenient facts and foundations got in the way. Look, if we're being honest, for years, the same mindset that let the Capitol get dirty and run down, it also treated our constitutional guardrails like they were optional. The physical decay and the institutional decay were connected. Both show a real loss of stewardship. You see, it's not about left or right. It's what's observable. Character shows up in the maintenance, in whether you leave things better than you found them. Anybody, anyone at all, and the left is better at it than anybody, can tear stuff down or let it rot. Real leadership, though, is subtle. It's quiet. It's understanding that you're just a temporary caretaker of something much older and bigger than yourself. That's biblical, as a matter of fact. That's why these changes matter so much. When a president looks at the reflecting pool, or he wants a new ballroom to host parties, but more importantly, something underneath it to protect the nation, when he wants Washington and its monuments to shine, when he wants the National Mall to feel majestic again, he's saying something important. He's saying America is worth taking care of. Our institutions are worth defending. Our history and inheritance, they're worth honoring. And after watching neglect for so long, I think it's refreshing to see leadership that gets stewardship again. Good leaders don't just hold office, they protect what was handed to them. So the next generation gets something stronger and better, not broken and forgotten. Meanwhile, the Democrats are in full tilt freakout mode, and we mentioned this earlier in the week, over the weaponization fund. Hilarious, actually. The top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee introducing legislation that would block a $1.8 billion fund to pay people who say they were the targets of politically motivated prosecutions. Now, again, discussing this earlier in the week, what this was is President Trump suing the government for releasing his taxes illegally. Wasn't supposed to happen. And President Trump said, I tell you what, I'll settle with the government. I don't need the money. Go ahead and put it into a fund, and we're going to pay people who have been abused by this government. The weaponization of government against its citizens, there are people suing the government. We're going to make a cash settlement pool for some of those victims. Oh, well, this cannot stand. And the left has been apoplectic about it. They're still talking about it today. In fact, even as I speak to you now, cable news is ratcheted up about this. President Trump talking more about this weaponized fund yesterday in clip 127.
Made a settlement of some kind. I wasn't involved in the settlement. I could have been involved, but I didn't choose to be. So they made a settlement. Also, the anti-weaponization of people. I mean, people were destroyed. They went to jail. Their families were ruined. They committed suicide. You know, all the Biden administration and the Obama administration, both of them. I mean, the Obama administration started it. The Biden administration was horrible in terms of what they've done to people is incredible. And we're reimbursing those people for their legal fees and for their costs and for anybody involved. But they destroyed people committing. I read the other day, a person committed suicide over it. They went, you know, it was the most violent thing I've ever seen in politics, what they did. And yet if I say, oh, let's look at this one or that one, they say weaponization. What they did in terms of weaponization will never be allowed to happen in this country again. So we think that those people, we think that anybody involved in that process should partake. And you're talking about peanuts compared to the value. It destroyed the lives of many, many people. Thank you very much.
Now, I will just point out that this is exactly where President Trump and conservatives and those of us who oppose Democrats and left-wingers, this is exactly where we want the conversation. Just in case some of you might have missed, why is this coming up? Why now? I think Donald Trump, I think Todd Blanche, I think the team at the White House understands that having a discussion right now, reminding people about the weaponization of government, creating this fund, making the left, I mean, the Democrats are literally trying to pass a law right now to fight it. And I think it's a legitimate thing that the president and the White House are trying to achieve here in the weaponization fund, because I do believe there were untold hundreds, if not more, citizens in this country who were victims of an overzealous, abusive government and deserve their day in court, and they deserve a settlement. I do believe that's true. And so I think this is a righteous and just fund. But having said that, it's also a great place for the national debate. President Trump and Republicans should welcome, and likely are welcoming, the media going nuts and the Democrats opposing this, because it reminds everyone of where we've been as a country. And it's worth reminding ourselves with regularity what leftists in power were committed to doing to stay in power. And we know we could go down the list of horribles if we want. I won't go down them all, but you know as well as I do, there was the censorship and silencing of social media accounts, shadow banning, forced shots, raids on people's homes, leg irons on people at airports like Peter Navarro. I mean, it was, raiding of President Trump's home. We could keep going on and on and on about the list of abuses, and that's just some of them. So I think it's worth reminding the electorate as we head into election season of where we were not too terribly long ago, and where the Democrats would love nothing more than to go back to. I like this conversation. I hope it keeps up. Remember James Comey? A couple of days ago, I played for you the clip of him saying to the deep staters inside the FBI, just hold on. Just wait this guy out. It won't be that much longer, and then you guys can get right back to there are people in the FBI. They're hunkering down. They're waiting quietly. They're trying to do the good work. They're just trying to stay outside of Donald Trump's watchful eye. Well, Trump heard that from Comey. Give me number 129. He addressed that yesterday as well.
Over the weekend, Mr. President, he suggested that there's still people in your DOJ and FBI that are waiting you out. They're waiting until your administration is over to get back to work. Do you think those people are still in the DOJ and FBI?
I hope not. Well, if they are, we're going to seek them out. We'll seek them out. We'll get rid of them. Okay? Because you have in every agency, you have scum. And certainly they did in the FBI and DOJ. But Todd Blanche is doing a fantastic job. Cash is doing a very good job. So we will prevail. I've been standing here a long time with you, many years, right? And they've been saying, I think it's it. I think he's troubled. Here I am, It's a very constant situation. But I think you're going to find that we have great people in the FBI and we have great people in DOJ. Todd Blanche has really been doing a great job.
It's there's a little winsomeness in Trump. I think there's some gratitude in that if you're really kind of digging a little bit into the psychology of Trump, to kind of smile and say, they've been saying I'm a bad guy for a long time. There have been a lot of people inside that organization try to take me down, and yet here I still stand. Isn't that something? I've been standing here with you for a long time. And it really is when you stop and consider. For 10 years, effectively, maybe more now, since he was a candidate in 2015 at least, we've been talking about this guy, and we've been talking about a weaponized system that has been desperate to get rid of him. And through the primaries, through multiple elections, through the impeachment fiasco, the Russia hoax, the assassination attempts, the home raids, the courts, the mug shots, there he still stands. I have a feeling if he wasn't a very spiritual guy before, I can't help but imagine, and I don't know the president, but I can't help but imagine in some quiet moments, if he really allows himself to reflect on it, you got to believe in the providential hand of God if you're him. After all of this, and as he smiled and said, I'm still here. It's pretty remarkable. Meanwhile, just summing up the week on the loss, Thomas Massie there in Kentucky, Speaker Johnson addressed this, and President Trump, who still, after all this time, still has the Midas touch in 1:30.
Last night, I'm just in a nutshell. I talked with the president late last night after everything was all the dust was settling over all the elections. And we talked about how his endorsement is the most powerful in the history of politics. I mean, anywhere in the world. I think it's just a phenomenal. I wasn't involved in the Kentucky primary, Thomas Massie's primary. The leadership team wasn't because he's an incumbent. But the president certainly made his opinion known, and I'm not surprised by the results there. The president knows what's at stake in this fall's elections, and he and I need conservative patriots here ready to help us continue saving America. And that's why we're working hand in hand to defend and grow this House Republican majority. I'm convinced we're going to do that. I'm thrilled about 3 more of our endorsed candidates who are going to do just that. They advanced last night: Ralph Alvarado in Kentucky, Houston Gaines, and Jim Kingston in the state of Georgia. All 3 of those are going to be great members next year as we defend and grow this majority. And at the same time, this is what's really important for everybody to be paying attention to. There's an effect happening around the country, and you'll have heard me summarize it this way. The best way to describe it in short summary is that there are many Mamdanis popping up all around the country running for Congress as Marxist, openly as socialist Marxist. And it's a race to the far, far, far left. And as we say all the time, this is not our father's Democratic Party. This group has been taken over. I mean, the Democratic Party has been totally taken over by the far left, and Hakeem Jeffries and the team here can't do anything about it. In fact, Republicans are the only ones that can stop them from destroying our country, and that's why we must and we will win. But they continue to nominate some extremely radical candidates last night. Even people, there's a candidate in Pennsylvania stolen from his own family, and he won the primary on the Democrat side. They're going to lose these swing districts. And in summary, we'll go to questions, but in summary, this is what it boils down to. You heard the leaders say it. You've heard all of us say this over and over and over. This is a contrast election, okay? And at the end of the day, the American people have to just look at this. It's contrast between common sense and crazy. We're going to ask the people. I mean, as all of our candidates and our incumbents are out in the field, they're just ask the questions. Do you want to keep the team in charge who secured the border, got dangerous criminal illegal aliens out of your communities and brought down crime? that got American energy dominance going again, that returned us to peace through strength, that has put all the conditions in the economy to make your life better and bring down the cost of living and higher paychecks and higher tax refunds, and got men out of women's sports and little girls' locker rooms and ended trans surgeries on minors. Do you want to keep that team, that party in charge of Washington? Or do you want to turn it over to the people that want to do the opposite of all those things I just described? It's a serious contrast. It's a serious chasm, a widening chasm between the two parties that didn't exist here even 20, 30 years ago. But this is where we are. And you got to keep America on track. And that's what this election is about. Okay.
Well said by Speaker Johnson. Mini Mamdanis popping up all over the country. And it's interesting that he chose Mamdani as his focus, because this week Mamdani is dealing with his own backlash in New York. All of his socialist utopian ideas are going to be funded, of course, by the fabulously wealthy. That's who he's coming after, because, frankly, those are the only people that could ever afford these pipe dreams. Most of the people in New York City don't really pay any taxes at all. So he needs the very, very wealthy to do his bidding. And there's been a big backlash from Fox Business. The outreach of Mayor Mamdani to some big shot billionaires now is pretty interesting. He faced criticism from billionaire investors and business leaders over proposals aimed at increasing taxes on wealthy residents as part of a broader affordability agenda. He met on Monday with JPMorgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon at the bank's new headquarters in Manhattan. We don't know specifically what was discussed. Citadel founder Ken Griffin was among the high-profile financiers who criticized the mayor's proposals during the campaign. Dimon had previously warned about the risks of high taxes and overregulation on New York's business climate. In past interviews, he cautioned that companies and workers could continue migrating to lower tax states if policymakers fail to maintain the city's competitiveness. Jeff Bezos is also very concerned about this and gave a rather interesting conversation to CNBC. These guys don't like talking a lot, and they certainly don't, even though they're extraordinarily, fabulously wealthy, they don't like to talk much about it. But I think they feel that the walls are starting to close in and that guys like Mamdani are catching fire. And they're right to be concerned, because they're the only ones left with money to come get. And so Bezos on New York City and talking about how they spend money, never mind people with money and coming after people with money. Let's talk about how the money that is collected via taxes, how it's spent. This Bezos interview was worth listening to. We're going to have some of it here. Take a listen.
Good example. The New York City school system, right? They spend $44,000 per student. $44,000. That's 30% more per student than other big cities like Chicago, right, LA, and Boston. And it's 3 times more than Miami and Houston. And by the way, New York City doesn't get better outcomes. But so what this, listen, let me just say, if we ran Amazon the way New York City runs their school system, right, your packages would take 6 weeks to arrive. We'd have to charge you a $100 delivery fee. And then when the package did finally arrive, it'd have the wrong item in it anyway. Right?
You know, we played a clip of a gentleman not too terribly long ago, I think at the Manhattan Institute, I don't remember exactly where, but talking about this very same statistic, $44,000 per pupil in the New York City school system. If you took just half of that and invested it and gave the other half to parents for school choice, what amazing outcomes could come of that, both in private sector wealth growth for citizens of New York, but also in education outcomes for kids. Bezos making the point, you just steal and give $44,000 per student away in tax money every single year. And for what? Diminishing returns, increasingly diminished returns. No student learning on the ascent, nothing getting better, no test scores getting better, nothing to show for a record sum of money spent per student just being taken from the taxpayer. And so Bezos said if we ran Amazon like this, I mean, we'd have to charge hundreds of dollars for our services. This continued. He got into the whole tax the rich scam that Mamdani is leveling here. Take a listen in 136.
And Elizabeth Warren has made this point repeatedly. I think she's made it in reference to you and others. are able to pay a lower tax rate, even though you're paying an enormous sum in taxes, a lower tax rate than maybe I am.
These people sometimes say that I don't pay taxes. It's not true. I pay billions of dollars in taxes. And it's a perfect, again, if people want me to pay more billions, then let's have that debate. But don't pretend, that's going to solve the problem. You could double the taxes I pay, and it's not going to help that teacher in Queens. I promise you. So you can't connect those two things, not logically. There are more examples. Why is rent expensive? Why is rent so expensive? I recently saw somebody blamed it on Airbnb. Okay, Airbnb is not the cause of expensive rent. In fact, it's been almost, let me finish here 1 sec. It's already been outlawed in New York City, and rents are still very high. So we know Airbnb isn't causing high rents. What's really causing high rent is government intervention.
Yes. Yes. I mean, look, you don't make billions if you don't understand the market, if you don't understand economics, if you don't understand how things work. And it's why Democrats who are always trying to steal from people who understand how who actually make things work, Democrats don't know how it works. So they just see success and they want to steal from it and give it away. And they think giving money away will lead to equal and better outcomes for everyone. And Bezos continues to underscore that old axiomatic truth that we all understand if we've even remotely studied economics, even at a base level. You cannot throw money at a problem and make something improve. That isn't the way it works. The free market and competition is always the better way, giving people a choice between product A and product B or C or D. Every time anyone has a choice in product of any kind, all those products have to compete for people's attention and provide the best service for the best price. And the person that can come in with the best service at the best price or product always wins every time. What Democrats want is only one service, no competition whatsoever, and they want to take from successful people and force everybody into one product that's not even working well when you're talking about something like education, and just keep taking money from rich people and throwing money at one thing that isn't working well. Just keep taking money and throwing money at it. And it's not even working. I mean, I think most sane people understand it, I hope, but Bezos is clearly concerned that a lot of people are starting to buy into what Mamdani is selling, what Elizabeth Warren has always sold, what Bernie Sanders and AOC have always sold. People with money have got to be punished. They're doing something to cheat you. You don't have money because the system is screwing you. And so we got to go take money from those rich people to make your situation better, which of course it never does, to Bezos's point. The economic lesson here that he's laying down is so important. I could probably in fact, I wish I could legally just get away with playing this interview in full, but we can't. So I'll give you clips of it. In number 37 here, 137, here's Bezos explaining the breakdown of the average person and the amount that they earn versus the amount of taxes that they pay. It's, again, this is just a classroom lesson in basic economics and government.
I started thinking about this and doing some research. A nurse in Queens who makes $75,000 a year pays more than $12,000 a year in taxes. Does that really make sense? So people talk about, making the tax system more progressive. How about we start by having the nurse in Queens not pay taxes? Why is somebody at all? Why is a nurse in Queens who makes $75,000 a year paying more than $1,000 a month in taxes? That's $1,000 a month that could help with rent or groceries or anything. And so, and by the way, do you know what that all adds up to? The bottom half of income earners in this country pay only 3% of the taxes. It's only 3%. We can find 3%. So we don't have, it's a small amount of money for the government, that. And really, and the more I thought about it, to me, it's kind of absurd that we're doing this. We shouldn't be asking this nurse in Queens to send money to Washington. They should be sending her an apology. It really makes no sense.
Wow. Is there any working class American who could disagree with what he just said? He's a billionaire, and he said, look, you can keep raising taxes on me, fine. Take more billions, fine. It's not going to make anything better. But I will say this, what will make things better is if you stop taking money out of the paycheck of a woman who's a nurse making $75K a year, let her keep $1,000 a month or whatever and see what that can do for her. You want to improve things? Why are we taking 3% from the lowest earners in this country? Why? I can make up 3%. My rich buddies and I can make up 3%. Let the people who have modest earnings keep that 3%. The government should be issuing an apology, and watch what can happen when people are given more of their own disposable income. Do you know what $12,000 means to someone making $75K a year if you just said go ahead and keep 12 grand a year? Do you know what that could do? Do you know the stimulus that could provide? But no, the government is this really clever sleight of hand trick, Democrats. They always do this. They want to keep that 3%. They want to keep snatching that 12 grand out of that nurse's check. And then instead of taking the blame for it, they try to make that nurse angry at Jeff Bezos for being so rich and not paying his fair share of taxes. Bezos is saying, okay, fine, come at me if you want, but let that nurse keep her tax money. Have you noticed Democrats never suggest that? Have you noticed that Elizabeth Warren and AOC and Bernie and Mamdani, have you noticed that they never, ever say to working class people, you should be allowed to keep that income tax that's taken? And President Trump, by the way, it's worth bringing up, has come up with a system in which the country used to do this, and he believes we should return to it, and that is fund our government operations through tariff revenue. You know, the income tax is not that old as a construct. It's certainly not constitutional. President Trump has said, and many Republicans and conservatives believe, we should eliminate the income tax. Jeff Bezos is effectively telling you, let's get rid of the income tax, at least on lower wage earners. What a stimulus that would be. And let's give people choice. All right, and then if you want to come after we rich people, we'll have that discussion too. But to that point, Jeff Bezos gives an economics lesson in how rich people make things work, and you just can't do without them, as much as people like AOC and the rest would love to bastardize them and throw them out of polite society. Give me number 138. Here he is explaining the importance of, yes, the billionaire.
Let me ask you about the anger, because there seems to be anger, at least from certain political sides of this. And AOC recently said in a podcast, I'm just curious how you think about this, says there's a certain level of wealth and accumulation that is unearned, she says. You can't earn $1 billion. Just can't earn that, she says. You can get market power, you can break rules, you can abuse labor laws, you can pay people less than what they're worth, but you can't earn that.
Yeah.
You, by the way, you've earned an extraordinary amount of money. You employ largest employer, if not one of them, in the whole country. When you read that, what do you think?
Well, it's not correct on its face. Let me give you a simple example. Let's say you start a burger joint and you have 10 employees, and you make a little bit of money, right? Until you have this one outlet. And by the way, these are the most delicious burgers in the world. People love your burgers, Andrew. And so then you open a second outlet, right? And now you're making a little bit more money, and you have 20 employees, and you open a third outlet. By the time you've opened 1,000 outlets, you are a billionaire, right? And by the way, this is a real life story. It happens all the time. It's In-N-Out Burger. It's Raising Cane's chicken. At what point did that money all of a sudden become unethical? Or it didn't. There was one outlet, and then there were two, and then there were three. What you're doing, the way you make $1 billion or $100 million or $10 million or anything, is you create a service that people love. And if millions of people choose your service, you're going to end up with $1 billion.
Right.
And you can, just try it with a chicken franchise.
Do you think, though?
But your chicken has to be good.
But there.
It's funny. My teenagers love Raising Cane's. It's funny that he brought that up, because Mamdani speaks to kids and young voters like my kids who are 21 and 20 and almost 18, and young people who are maleducated, don't know economics. They don't know what Bezos is saying at all. They've never heard it before. But Mamdani comes along, or AOC comes along, and they say those rich guys have too much. You don't have enough. It's hard for you to get ahead. Let's go take it from them. And young people, skulls full of mush, as Rush used to call them, would fall for that and say, yeah, let's go get them. Bezos then kind of makes, I think, and this is smart of him, he brings up something like Raising Cane's, because young people love Raising Cane's. Love it. You may too, whether you're young or old. But my point is, I bet my kids, and I'm going to test this a little later and see if I'm right. I bet my kids don't think about Raising Cane's and the guy that owns it, whoever he is, as a billionaire. They don't think of him as a billionaire. But to Bezos's point, he is. He created one chicken joint, which grew into two, and so on. And along the way, he created jobs, but he also grew assets. And now he's sitting, with a chain of stores all over, I presume, the country. I don't exactly know where they're found. But you're talking that he is now certainly a multimillionaire, maybe a billionaire. But a lot of people, particularly young people who go through Starbucks or Raising Cane's, they don't think of these food joints as billionaire owners. They just think of big tech guys or bank guys. The left always does that. They don't tackle people's food, which incidentally, there are a healthy number of people. Kevin O'Leary, I just saw this week, said, if people stop buying so many Starbucks drinks and Raising Cane's lunches, they may be able to afford a house. And I know that's arguable, but it is interesting. Young people in the consumer economy that we live in, they're not mad really at Apple because they like their iPhone. They're not really mad at Raising Cane's and a chicken joint. They're not really mad at Starbucks because that's stuff that they buy every day and they use and they like and they feel good about. Amazon, they use too, but Amazon, Bezos, SpaceX, that Elon Musk, the tech stuff, that's kind of over there. That's out there. That's something most of us don't really understand. And so it's easy to vilify and say those rich guys, they live in like a mountain with a monocle and they're stroking a white cat. You can vilify them. I like Bezos' strategy here. I think that wealthy job creators should do more of this. Humanize wealthy people. Explain why wealthy people are making your life better as a consumer, because they're offering you services for dirt cheap, like Amazon. They're offering you products and quality, unlike government, a choice and high quality at a low price, at a cost competitive price. I don't know a lot about Bezos. I've always thought him to be center left. As far as I know, I don't even know that he's center. He may be hard left, but he's clearly alarmed. He and Jamie Dimon and others are alarmed at the rise of, as Mike Johnson said, the mini Mamdanis popping up all over the country. Businesses are fleeing California for places like Texas. Businesses are fleeing the Northeast for places in the South. And these businesses, I suppose, are probably thinking to themselves, boy, if this kind of attitude from Mamdani starts to take root in not just California or New York, but if it starts to chase us to Tennessee or Texas or Florida, we could have real problems. So the education campaign, I think, is on from job creators and wealth producers in this country, and it's probably a little too late, but worth doing nonetheless, and I'm glad to see Bezos doing it. Meanwhile, what's the left up to? I've got a stack thick this week. I thought I'd run through some of these. Lawyers for the man accused of killing Charlie Kirk asked to seal evidence and parts of a key hearing. Lawyers for the man accused of killing Charlie urged a Utah judge on Tuesday to seal some evidence and bar reporters from public for parts of a key upcoming hearing. There's some real pessimists who believe that this guy and his attorneys could cleverly end up helping this guy, if not skate, certainly avoid the death penalty. A lot of questions surrounding it, and we've seen a judicial system that continues to almost show empathy for the criminal, the killer, the murderer. We've seen it in cases with many illegals. We've seen it in many illegal gun crimes. The Mangione story is another one. Luigi Mangione, who killed the United Healthcare CEO in broad daylight in Manhattan. You've seen and heard undoubtedly people outside the courtroom saying that they're glad the guy was murdered. Mangione is being made a folk hero of the American left. And now it appears that some of the materials that were seized from his backpack when they found him in that Pennsylvania McDonald's A warrant was required to go through the backpack. Law enforcement who went through the backpack did not acquire a warrant. And so a lot of the evidence that was found in that backpack, his attorneys, and he's a wealthy guy, his attorneys are arguing that it's inadmissible in court. They may be successful, and there are people that speculate a guy like Mangione, who clearly murdered this guy in broad daylight, and maybe like an OJ thing, he may get to walk scot-free because of a technicality. So 2 things to watch. Meanwhile, the suspects in this San Diego shooting, didn't talk about this earlier in the week. Suspects have been identified in San Diego as 17-year-old Kane Clark and 18-year-old Caleb Vasquez, who both died of self-inflicted gunshot wounds after authorities confirmed Tuesday they are the suspected shooters in the attack on an Islamic center. And when I heard this story originally, I waited on it because I was curious to know what drove it. Obviously, immediately people went into hate crime mode. And then I started hearing analysis right away that it was 2 young men who had killed themselves after shooting up this Islamic center. And I find it interesting. Caleb Vasquez does not sound like your typical white guy. I don't know. Kane Clark perhaps does, but neither here nor there. The narrative was young, troubled men. And young men are being scapegoated right and left in this country, which I would also argue is why they're sometimes turning into paranoid and violent people, because they feel so put upon. And quite frankly, that's just true of many young men in this country who are going about their business doing nothing other than just being young, straight, white Christian men. And for this, they're being maligned by polite society on the left. And I do think we're driving a lot of young men to bitter, angry rage. I think that is true and a real problem. In this case, though, they're not turning conservative. In fact, just the opposite. They've become left-wing wackos. And the manifesto includes Nazi imagery, live stream video of the attack. I'm a straight male, he said. This is from the New York Post. I'm certainly not left-wing, nor am I right-wing, especially not with MAGA or Trump. Politically, I'd call myself a third positionist, specifically aligning most with National Socialism and eco-fascism. So that sounds a lot more like the left, even though they don't know it. National Socialism and eco-fascism is certainly nothing conservatives, Trump, or MAGA stand for. So more mentally ill leftists assassinating people with whom they have disagreement. Keep a sharp eye on this one. We talked earlier about the hantavirus. That seems to have ebbed. That didn't work. So now they're going toward Ebola. Here we go again. The ongoing Ebola surge has public health experts anxious about the world's capacity to contain its spread. I'm not trying to alarm anybody about it. I'm just saying, folks, keep a sharp eye. Hantavirus petered out. Ebola now on deck. As we head into an election, we know how well COVID worked before. Just keep a sharp eye. Don't let hysterics take root. Make sure you rip that mask off the next hysterical leftist you see if they're starting to ratchet things up on viruses and other things. You start to see global, world, national, state health officials holding press conferences. Take a deep breath and slap the panic out of your friends and neighbors who want to take us back to that place where we're all held hostage. Just cautioning you, there is an appetite, particularly on the left, when they see that there could be looming defeat politically. There is an appetite on the left to try desperately to get you to panic. And if they can get you to panic, then you'll hand over a lot of security. You'll hand over a lot of oversight. You'll hand over just about anything if you think it'll protect you from catching Ebola or hantavirus or COVID. The left's gotten very, very good at panicking people to give up their rights. And Benjamin Franklin warned about that. Speaking of our founding, you can go back and find the classic quote. If you're willing to give up your liberty for the promise of security, then eventually you'll have neither. 198 Democrats oppose requiring parental consent for student gender changes in schools. Here's more of this pit of hell craziness that the left will also, again, what Mike Johnson said, this fall is going to be about sanity versus insanity. Crazy versus common sense. That's what this fall is going to be about, period, full stop. 198 House Democrats voted against a bill requiring federally funded elementary and middle schools to get parental consent before changing a student's pronouns, preferred name, or sex-based accommodations. This from the Washington Examiner. House Republicans passed the legislation. 198 House Democrats opposed the measure. The bill, titled the Stopping Indoctrination and Protecting Kids Act, would require parental consent to change a student's gender markers, pronouns, and preferred name, such as locker room or bathroom designation as well. Under the legislation, all elementary and middle school grades defined under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965 as grades 5 through 8 would be included, and Democrats oppose this. Democrats would love nothing more than to have institutional separation between children and families. They would love to indoctrinate young people with this pit of hell lie that God makes mistakes and we can change their gender. And by the way, let's keep it a secret from mom and dad. Common sense versus crazy. I would say dark. And back to our jumping off point today. Spiritual battle, spiritual darkness. You think we're in it? Do you think we're in it? When you hear there are politicians that actually want to create a safe haven for public, taxpayer-supported schools to indoctrinate your children and keep it a secret from you. And back to Bezos. They're snatching money from your paycheck. They're sending it to public schools that aren't improving, but they're hell-bent on committing to separating you from your children and keeping secrets with your children and encouraging children to transition, perhaps, and use the bathroom and the pronouns of their choosing. You think we're not in a spiritual battle? Think again. And the left is very, very disappointed in John Fetterman, so much so that even his own team continues to fall away. The Pennsylvania Democrat has had serious staff retention problems as he's faced scrutiny over his health struggles and changing political brand. His chief of staff resigned this week, served on his team since he first came to Washington. Her official last day will be in the coming weeks. And Fetterman didn't have anything to say about that. And meanwhile, in Georgia, a guy named Dolezal there, a state senator, claims that the Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, who just lost his race, thankfully, real scumbag, told the state election board through its chair that observers would not be allowed in a central voter location known as the bunker, where the state receives, verifies, and reports vote totals. The Georgia state senator running for lieutenant governor this year has filed a lawsuit seeking a court order to allow a bipartisan observation of the state's election night operations center. Transparency should not be controversial, said the senator. Dolezal claims that the Secretary of State Raffensperger, who again just got his butt kicked by Republicans over the election of last here on Tuesday, Dolezal told the Secretary of State that the state election board, through its chair, observers won't be allowed into the central location known as the bunker. So here again, Raffensperger and Georgia election officials are trying to keep the headquarters of the vote count secret, only observable by them. Dolezal says, why can't we have bipartisan election observers? Well, you know why, because Georgia, Fulton County, Georgia, hello, they want to steal. And they want to do it without bipartisan watchdogs. And so good for Dolezal for bringing it up. We know the DOJ is actively investigating what went down in places like Pima County, Arizona, and Fulton County, Georgia. I suspect we're going to hear a lot more about that as the summer rolls on and we get closer to election season, and that's a very, very good thing. Let's go to some good news to close out the week. And there is actually quite a bit of it, as a matter of fact, in no particular order. Speaking of Georgia, Georgians handed Democrats a decisive defeat this week by reelecting two Republican-backed candidates in a pair of highly contested Supreme Court races. So these two, initially appointed to their positions by former GOP Governor Nathan Deal, received backing from the current GOP Governor Kemp. As the Federalist reported, the elections came a day after the federal appellate court unsealed damning findings You can read this story in full. I'm not going to get into all the particulars of it. But anyway, the conservative candidates now sweep the Georgia Supreme Court elections. So Georgia is trending more conservative is my point. Again, you can read at the Federalist the very specifics about these two candidates if you want, if you're interested there in Georgia. But the bottom line is the scumbags like Raffensperger are getting tossed. People like Dolezal running for lieutenant governor are pushing for more election integrity. The FBI is looking under the hood of what went on in Florida. The Supreme Court, in Georgia. The Supreme Court in Georgia is getting more conservative. That's all good. A former federal prosecutor has been charged with stealing the sealed volume of the report prepared by then special counsel Jack Smith about the defunct criminal case against Donald Trump over his retention of classified government documents. Carmen Mercedes Lineberger, accused in a 4-count indictment unsealed yesterday of saving the sealed portion of Smith's report on her government-issued computer. That's good. More prosecutions. People that have been asking for more accountability, now we're starting to see it. Todd Blanche and this DOJ, we're starting to hear more stories like this. I suspect we will continue to hear more stories like this again through the summer and heading into the fall. The DOJ is now charging people inside their ranks, these scumbags that aided and abetted guys like Jack Smith. They're undoubtedly hoovering up this material, storing it, keeping it, waiting for a rainy day that they can weaponize it and use it. Good to see Trump's DOJ and the FBI cracking down on it. This is good news. President Donald Trump on Tuesday signed an executive order directing banks to more aggressively scrutinize illegals, closing a fiscal fence around American taxpayer interests and resources, and likely further incentivizing self-deportations. Scott Rasmussen telling Just the News, 80% of voters believe that illegal immigration is bad for America. And by the way, the flip side of it is 80% believe illegal immigration is good for, legal immigration is good for America. So let me say that again, just so I'm clear. Scott Rasmussen says 80% of everyone polled believe illegal immigration is bad, but that same 80% believe that legal immigration is good. So we are a generous and charitable and welcoming country. We just want it done the right way. Everybody understands that. It's not racist. Trump's Tuesday order, titled Restoring Integrity to America's Financial System, directs federal regulators and the Treasury to issue guidance strengthening banks' customer due diligence, identify red flags and suspicious activity linked to undocumented immigrants, and off-the-books wages, manage credit risks from extending loans and services to non-work authorized individuals. So, again, the fiscal burden of illegals disappearing now that President Trump is cracking down on the border and forcing institutions to scrutinize their lending practices. No money flowing into foreign countries courtesy of illegals who have broken into the country. Trump turning the screws on that, and the American people stand with him. Trump RX adds more than 600 generic drugs, and Mark Cuban was part of the rollout this week. Did you see this? President Trump announcing the addition of more than 600 generic drugs to his drug coupon platform, Trump RX. I'm thrilled to announce, this is the quote directly from Trump, we're increasing the number of drugs available on Trump RX by nearly 7 times. Working with industry partners, cost-effective generic drugs are often available at just a tiny fraction of the price of their brand name equivalents, and in theory, they're the same thing. The administration launching Trump RX in February with 43 branded prescriptions, and Mark Cuban was there to tout it. He owns a similar business to Trump RX called Cost Plus Drugs. Previously praised the project, writing on social media, in my opinion, anything that saves patients money is a win. So all these left-wing successful guys who hated Trump or certainly politicked against him now suddenly finding friendship with him. I think that's interesting. From the accountability front, the post-millennial Harmeet Dillon, brilliant lady, heads the Civil Affairs Division of the FBI, or the Civil Rights Division, I should say, at DOJ, not FBI. Harmeet Dillon launches investigation into Washington state over housing men in women's prisons. Right on. This follows several accusations from female prisoners alleging that male inmates who identify as trans have committed various crimes against them, including sexual abuse. Of course they have. You put men pretending to be women in women's prisons, and then these women get assaulted, and people are shocked? No, they're not. This social experiment is garbage. Harmeet Dillon is actually stepping in to defend women prisoners, folks. Think of that. This evil, wicked Trump administration is actually stepping in to defend women in prison because leftists think men can be women. And as it turns out, men who pretend they're women and want to mill about with women are often predators and mentally ill and abusive and potentially rapists or worse. I can't even believe we're here and having to discuss this as though it's a legitimate news item, but here we are. And that's, again, what Mike Johnson was saying. That's what this election is about this fall. Crazy or common sense. Panda Express. Never eaten there in my life. Have you? I've had Raisin Cane's. I have not had Panda Express. They promise now a more welcoming experience after a MAGA hat-wearing vlogger says he was kicked out. Video of the incident shows 2 employees outside the restaurant where the vlogger continued to record, telling him he had to leave. He claims these Panda Express employees called cops on him because he was wearing a MAGA hat. A Panda restaurant group spokesperson said they're reviewing the details. We want everyone who walks into Panda Express to feel welcome and treated with respect. Chris Sims describes himself on X as a disaffected liberal turned conservative, said in a post he and another vlogger were kicked out of the location for wearing a hat and giving a cook a thumbs up. He asked the cook whether there was an issue. The cook said his MAGA hat was the problem. Video of the incident that Sims posted shows 2 Panda Express employees outside the restaurant where Sims continued to record. The employees told the pair to leave. Police showed up to talk to the employees, who told the officers the pair refused to leave. They deny they refused to leave, so on and so forth. Do we know where that was from? Which? They don't tell us where. They don't tell us the location. Okay. Well, anyway, the Panda Express people say, no. You're welcome to wear your MAGA hat inside. I guess Panda Express corporate is smart enough to know that MAGA people like Panda Express too. 23 attorneys general are probing federal judicial center's distribution of biased climate guide to judges. Again, crazy or common sense. A coalition of state attorneys general demanding answers about the federal judicial center's distribution of a science manual to federal judges that contained citations to left-wing climate activists. 23 attorneys general sent a letter to look into this thing called a reference manual on scientific education. The manual is designed to guide and inform federal judges in their assessment of science-related matters in cases that come before the bench. So left-wing, global warming dreck, Green New Deal propaganda dreck being fed to judges as fact, as science. And these federal judges, who we know are overwhelmingly hostile to Donald Trump and conservatives anyway, now being fed this propaganda that they are ostensibly intended to use to cite in court cases against business, industry, uphold regulations that choke jobs and choke business. The federal judiciary being fed more left-wing propaganda is nothing that we need. Good to see these 23 state attorneys general, all of them conservatives, of course, going after this document. I like it. Speaking of the lie of global warming, Honda has posted their first ever annual loss in nearly 70 years. Why? Well, because as it turns out, people don't want these stupid plug-in cars. People do not believe their cars are warming the planet. The ship has sailed on this thing. It is consistently polled as one of the dead last priorities or concerns of the American electorate. And Honda Motor has now posted their first ever annual loss. The Japanese car company's bet on electric vehicle sales left it with $9 billion in restructuring costs due to low demand and Trump's Made in America policies. So another bank shot win on both the politics of the day and Trump's desire to bring manufacturing back home. EV demand, electronic vehicle, has declined considerably due to the rollback of environmental regulations in the United States and other factors, says Honda. So you see, rules and regs based on this stupid, fictitious Green New Deal, global warming crap. Donald Trump, Lee Zeldin at EPA, hack. They start raising tariffs overseas, and look what's happened. People turn away from these EV mandates. They don't want to buy them, so they're not going to buy them for the tax credit and the tax incentive. Builders car makers, manufacturers, they don't have to adhere to all this eco-wacko crap. And so companies that tried to lean into the government rejiggering of the economy by making EVs, they took a bath. They bet on the wrong horse. They should have bet on Donald Trump. They should have bet on MAGA. The Green New Deal and the American left have lost. They've lost big time. Companies are being rescued from it, and companies that bet on it are losing their shirts, and that's a good thing. And then finally, the White House also endorsed the House's amended housing package after lawmakers agreed to mirror a Senate bill that bans private equity ownership of single-family homes. Right on. This is good. When we talk about housing affordability, big banks and investment firms buying up single-family homes, not good. And the House's amended package is set for a vote this week. If they didn't already vote on it yesterday, I didn't see if they did. The House version now includes an investor ban provision akin to the Senate, limiting private equity ownership of single-family homes, a key agenda of President Trump's. And let's see the specifics to it. The new House bill still doesn't match the Senate's language requiring large investors to sell long-term rental properties. The latest change came minutes after labor unions raised concerns about lax protections for construction workers, on and on and on. Anyway, this is very, very good news. It sounds like Republicans in the House, anyway, are serious about joining President Trump and limiting the investor class and big banks from buying up single-family homes. In theory, they will either have to divest or sell, and that will increase the market. You know, President Trump's in this spot where people who own a home, if you own a home now, nobody wants to lose their equity. You start to flood the market with a bunch of homes. You will see diminished returns for people that are holding homes with equity in it. But if you can shake loose some of the existing homes in the market that have been hoovered up by investment, that could be a good thing. That will increase supply at least a little bit, hopefully lowering interest rates for loans, but not just torpedo the equity that you might already have built up in your home if, in fact, you're looking down the barrel of maybe selling it in the next 10 years or so and cashing out. It's a delicate balance. It's tough. It's a tough thing to do. And I tell you what, President Trump is trying to undo a lot of economic ruin. And again, less than a year and a half. It is a tall order, but I believe he's the man to do it. And that's going to do it for us today from America's Heartland. Be sure to stay close by subscribing to the Heartlander news channel here on YouTube, and you'll get a new show every time we make one. And be sure, give us a like and comment too if you can. We're really glad to have you along. Hope you have a great Memorial Day weekend, and we'll see you back here next time on Heartlander News.